You know, I made a video on my second channel where I discussed the filmography of Martin Scorsese in the run-up to Killers of the Flower Moon. Check it out. And when making it, I was thinking to myself, this guy has been making films since the 60s. His first hit was Mean Streets in 1973. That was 50 years ago. His first masterpiece was Taxi Driver in the same decade. And it can easily be argued he has at least one masterpiece every subsequent decade, and he may well have just made his for the 2020s. Incredible. When most filmmakers from his generation have faded into obscurity or are quite literally dead, he has remained at the forefront of cinema with a uniquely incomparable, varied and long filmography. I'm still digesting his new film. As I've said in previous videos, whether it be Goodfellas, The Wolf of Wall Street or The Irishman, strangely I've been lukewarm on a lot of Scorsese flicks before they sink in after rewatches and I really start to like them. With this one, I thought it was brilliant, but it is an exhausting picture that tests your patience. Let's get a few things out of the way before we really get into it. Killers of the Flower Moon, which follows a series of murders of rich Osage Native Americans in the 1920s, is a commendable film for a whole bunch of reasons, and no doubt many reviews will talk up how it's an important picture, about how it shines a light on a series of events that were brushed under the carpet and isn't talked about in history classes, about how it gives focus to a genocide, and how timely we're witnessing one now on the world stage, about how the movie went from being a formulaic detective movie and was changed to give the natives more of a voice, about how the current Osage Nation were consulted during filming and had substantial contributions, with you really being able to get a feel of their culture in the film, and about how the movie cast actual Native Americans in important roles. And the thing is, a movie can be all of those things. It can be important and praiseworthy for all those kind of right reasons, but it can still be a bad film. So much as I do genuinely think Scorsese's films should be held on a pedestal for those reasons, and we could talk about it for a long time, I'm going to ignore most of those elements in this review and focus more on the technical side of filmmaking, rather than the social commentary. It's worth noting that I was able to see this film, with its mammoth 3 hours and 26 minutes runtime, in a screening that had an intermission halfway through, which was a major help, as my bladder would have probably exploded otherwise. Even with that, the movie felt really long. The Irishman beats it by about 3 minutes, but it felt longer than Scorsese's previous film. I think with The Irishman, I kinda knew where I was in the film. Hoffa getting out of prison was like the halfway mark. The closing of one chapter of the film and the opening of another. When Sheeran gets old, it's clearly towards the end of the film. You know the movie's about to wrap up soon. With Killers, and obviously this is something that will dissipate with rewatches, but I couldn't quite always work out where I was. Are we halfway yet? Is the film almost finished? I guess when the FBI show up, probably around 2 hours and 15 minutes in, I'd say, it feels like a bit of a change of pace and the movie becomes something different. But Killers largely keeps the same tempo throughout its runtime. It never really rises and falls in intensity or rhythm, aside from a few moments here and there, and that will be challenging for many people. I do feel this is a movie that has been consciously made with the idea that its permanent home will be streaming, like Scorsese's previous. Where previously he's had to battle over movie lengths with studios, he now has the ability to add an hour to his film's runtime and put in what would usually go in an extended edition or a director's cut or something. There's an argument to be made for how much is too much, but I can't think of any scene I would want taken out of the film. I just enjoyed being in that world, as oppressive and brutal as it was. Remember that guy who made Goodfellas and Casino? Those rip-roaring roller coaster rides? Well, this movie isn't made by that director. He stopped working after The Wolf of Wall Street. In fact, Scorsese has actually said in an interview that he basically consciously moved away from dramatic camera work after seeing others imitate him. Killers of the Flower Moon is made by the guy who made Silence and The Irishman. It's a movie made by a man less concerned with entertaining you per se, and someone who's more concerned with death, with crossing over, with legacy, morality, and the changing of time. The casting of movie greats like DiCaprio and Niro is almost a smokescreen. I had an elderly couple next to me in the cinema saying they thought it was going to be a gangster film. Some might call it a maturity of his filmmaking. Others might say he's always made movies like this, such as Kundun. But either way, Killers forgoes the fancy tracking shots and montages of Goodfellas, which we love, and instead, like The Irishman, zones in on its three central characters and their drives and motivations. But it is funny, you know, there was a montage of sorts of De Niro bumping off his underlings to avoid jail time, and someone has to point De Niro out in court, both things which happen in Goodfellas. Plus, there is actually a kind of Goodfellas casino structure to the film, where the first section of the movie shows you the life and the culture before kicking off the story. The acting in the film was terrific. Fans of the channel may know I'm not the biggest DiCaprio fan around, but I thought he was brilliant in this film as Ernest Burkhart. Robert De Niro, as always in Scorsese films, brings his A-game in a transformative performance as Ernest's uncle William King Hale that makes you forget you're watching an actor put on an accent, and he could easily nab an Oscar nomination. At 80 years old, this guy reminds us why he is one of the greatest actors of all time. His words in the film say something. His face says it too, but there's another layer behind that face that says something very different. Lily Gladstone probably gave the best performance of the film. She was magnificent and dignified, and her character was the beating heart of the film in what would otherwise be a very cold picture, as we are usually with the killers and the wolves throughout the runtime. There was a lot of subtlety and nuance in the acting in this picture, and subtlety and straightforwardness in the depiction of events, like in Silence and The Irishman. People die, people get shot, and it's depicted as everyday, straightforward events. There's a lot of show not tell too. You might come across a scene where you're like, why is this in the film? Why is this scene so long? But it's telling you something. Like Molly's house is just full of her sister and her mother, but after her and Ernest get married, there's a shot going through the house, just ambling around, people doing their thing, and you might think to yourself, what is this about? But it's showing us, look how many white people are here now. The house is full and crowded, and it's all full of Ernest's relatives and friends, and it's trying to tell you something. I was very pleased that the movie opened by giving us some historical context to the events in the film. Having read the book, there's so much that goes on before the murders even start, and they did well with the lamentation of the Osage Nation that future generations will lose their culture, explaining that the Osage people were forced onto barren land which miraculously struck oil, explaining the exploitative and cruel system whereby Osage people had to have white guardians to control their wealth as they were considered incompetent, thereby giving them an incentive to marry white people and the white people an incentive to marry the natives. And if we say by sheer coincidence the natives start getting sick, shot, or started committing suicide, well, then the oil head rights would move from person to person until they landed with the white person. As Ernest returns home and gets off the train, the strange dynamic of Osage County, bizarre to anyone who's grown up on cowboy and Indian movies, is laid before him. Affluent Indians dressed in jewelry and driving fast cars to the point of parody, chauffeured by white people, begged by white people to purchase their products. The white people are drunkards and unruly, the natives move with grace and elegance. And when he meets his uncle, William Hale, or King, as he is often referred to, he gives his impressionable nephew the idea of wooing Molly Burkhart, who he's been driving around as a taxi driver, and marrying her. He seems to genuinely love her, but as he says, he also has a great love for money. And the inception of Ernest and Molly's relationship is very important because the movie swings back round to it towards the end of the film, really dissecting it and analysing how deep really was Ernest into this whole thing. When did stupidity and naivety cross over into complicity? How far did he go in lying to his wife, if he even went as far as to lie to himself? It's really interesting the way the film went about this aspect. The whole thing about murdering Osage people is there, it's in the air, but it's never spoken about directly save for a few minutes by the people doing the killings. There's never a scene where Hale has Ernest, the doctors, the lawyers, and a whole bunch of people in a room and cackles about how he's going to take out the natives. Murder is just bluntly discussed, to the point where it actually becomes funny, or at least some scenes are so dark you can't help but laugh because there's no real reaction that feels appropriate. Like one part where Sally Buggs from The Irishman talks to a legal man, saying that If he adopted his Osage widow's children and then they were killed, would he get their money? The lawyer then says to him, "You do realize you are implying to me that you will kill these children and take their wealth?" And he's like, "Well, I'm not going to do it, but would I get the money?" Things like that. Very, very dark humor. Some may have preferred if they left it a mystery in the first hour or so about who the killers are, as I have seen reviews where people said the movie lacked tension because we know what's going on. This isn't really a murder mystery, there's nothing really to spoil as to who is doing the killings. So that's something worth discussing. That's the way they chose to do it, I guess, and it makes it a different movie. As stated, this isn't Shutter Island Scorsese, this is silent Scorsese. There's a silent thunder to it, a restraint that is so paramount it frustrates you. You want there to be a scene where someone screams at the killers, where someone lashes out, where someone shouts, "What was your problem? Why couldn't you just let these people live?" But aside from a bizarre scene where De Niro literally spanks DiCaprio's ass in a Freemason lodge, there is no such scene, and the movie leaves you with a burning frustration that has no catharsis. It's a scary film, a movie showing how a people can be so otherized that you even can marry them and have children with them and still consider them a different species entirely and want their murder. Maybe like Ernest, you love them, but your love for money overrides this love, and it's easier to convince yourself this insulin you're giving your wife as she grows sicker and sicker is really helping her. In a way, the movie is about the normalization of decadency, putting a veil on cruelty and oppression, putting it out of sight, out of mind, a veil so thick that you blind not only your eyes but your own very heart, something Ernest struggles with at points. There was one major deviation the movie made from the book. Ask me about it in the comment section below if you want to know. I don't want to spoil it for audiences, of course. It's clear Scorsese wants Ernest to be a conflicted character, which might actually be doing the real-life figure a flattery, as there's something very sinister the movie leaves out of the book. But aside from that, there are no real major deviations, although I think it would have been cool if they included that part from the book where the detective gets thrown off a train. The core of the movie is the relationship between Ernest and Molly, as best exemplified by the fact that there are two major confession scenes, one where Ernest talks to the FBI and the other, later, when he talks to his wife, and the scene with the wife is given more gravitas. There's loads of interesting things to discuss about this film. Man, I haven't seen a film in cinemas in such a long time that actually makes you want to think. The epilogue is really interesting. Obviously, I won't go into it too much here, but it was an artistic and meta change of pace. Scorsese himself has the final word, literally, commenting on the historical absence of a footnote of the events of the film, and even commenting on the very nature of the film itself, that it's a story told by outsiders playing dress-up, but in film terms, he then steps back, allowing the final shot of the film to be of the Osage. The movie looked great. I've been told it sounded great, but I didn't really get a feel of the score because we had some really loud music pumping in the screening next to us. And it is a terrific picture. They picked side actors that looked the part for the time period too. I don't quite know where I'd put it against Scorsese's other pictures, but it's definitely up there. It's probably his best film since the 21st century came about. But of course you can't really make such claims just after you've watched the film. Have you seen Killers of the Flower Moon? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comment section below. And thanks for watching.